Welcome to The One Inside, an internal family systems podcast. I'm your host, Tammy Sollenberger. I'm excited that you and all of your parts have taken time to be with me and all of my parts. If you are a coach, a client, a therapist, if you are in business or education, and you're curious about the IFS model, you are in the right place. Now, let's see what happens on today's podcast. Hey everyone. On today's episode, I speak with Marushka Glissen. Marushka is an assistant trainer with the IFS Institute. We talk about legacy burdens. Legacy burdens are those beliefs, feelings, perspectives, can even show up in your body, which are passed down from generation to generation. It's been a tough week in our country and in our world. A part of me wants to tell you what this episode is about, and then another part of me just wants you to listen and just take in Marushka's story because it's really powerful and really beautiful. One of the things that she says is, and I think we should all keep this in mind given what's happened over the past week, is she says, "My life is a miracle. My life is a gift, and that is how I want to live." One of the things that I took away from this episode is her positivity and is this gratefulness that she experiences about her life. And I think that's probably something that we could all do right now. We also talk about trees, and I thought it's a rainy day here in New Hampshire, but tomorrow's going to be sunny, and I'm going to go hug a tree because we're not allowed to hug each other right now. We're not supposed to shake hands or hug. We're not even supposed to touch our own faces. So I thought, you know what I can touch is a tree. And after you listen to this, you'll know what I mean. So go hug a tree because you can't hug anyone else. I hope you guys are taking care. I know it's tough, and I know lots of people are struggling. So I hope this episode, even with the subject matter, is so tough, but I hope that it is encouraging in a way for you to remember that there is survival and there is life. I think you'll be surprised at how uplifting this story is. Enjoy this one.
Hi there.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
It's so nice to see you.
I know, me too.
So I'm in this little cafe. It's a little chilly in here, so I've got my coat on still.
Okay.
Tell everybody where you are in the world.
Well, I'm in Boston in my house.
Yeah, and what does it look like outside your nearest window?
I'm looking at my garden, my little garden that's winterized now. And there's this huge tree that dumps all kinds of crap on my car all the time. But it's older than I am, so I'm going to leave it alone.
Do you end up with like bird stuff on your car because of the tree?
But that's what it's like living in Boston, right?
Yeah. So you're in the city. You're in the city.
I'm in JP. I'm in
Okay.
Plain. Yeah.
Okay. Have you always lived there?
No, I lived in Newton for 20 years when I was raising my kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's we have snow on the ground, but there's no snow in the forecast today. It's going to be sunny, but it's cold outside.
Yeah, it's been cold. I think we're a little spoiled because we haven't gotten a lot of snow yet.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been that cold.
No.
But when it's cold, it's cold.
It's really cold.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, I know. I'm feeling that. I'm also feeling, I don't know if this is happening to you, but I'm definitely starting to feel the hibernation is really kicking in.
Yeah.
It's cold. I don't want to leave my house. I want to watch Hallmark murder mystery movies.
Yeah. Yeah, and you hear that from your clients too. That when the winter comes, there's definitely seasonal affect disorder. It's definitely real.
Yeah. Isn't it weird when, well, this, I feel this way. I'm not sure if you feel this way, but when your clients are complaining of the same things that you're you're suffering with,
Right,
and it's hard
right,
not to go, oh, me too, me
right.
too. I didn't want to leave my house either today.
Yeah. Except sometimes that can help when you tell them that you've gone through similar things or you've been
Mm,
there. It can really help. It just
mm,
depends.
yeah,
Not that you didn't want to leave your house though. Probably that wouldn't help, but
yeah, yeah. That's true. Yeah, because I think it does help when there's this similarity or sort of bonding or like, yeah, like I've had that. Yeah,
I've been there too. I've
yeah,
been there too.
it's hard to know though, right? It's hard to know how much like personal disclosure to do.
Right, right, right. I don't do a lot, but, and it depends how long you've been with a client too, or how
Yeah.
long a client's been with you.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it is funny because sometimes my clients have been with me long enough, like they remember me when I was pregnant, or they've like gone and come back. And so then it's like, it's kind of funny because it's like they've been through all these different stages of my life with me.
Right,
It's kind of fun that way.
right. How did you come to do this?
A couple of years ago, I have a friend that's a professor, and we were talking about podcasts and how popular they are because internationally people can listen to a podcast without learning. They don't need to know how to read. I was like, that's really interesting, and then it made me start thinking about IFS and are there any IFS podcasts? And I couldn't find any, and so then I approached John a couple years ago, John Schwartz, Dick's brother, who runs
Yeah,
the IFS Institute. I approached him at the conference and was like, are there any IFS podcasts out there? And so that sort of began me just wanting, sort of curious about it. And then I actually have I actually have three friends, two that do like local people that I know like in real life that have super popular podcasts. One's like a health coach, and two are do couples therapy, and they have these podcasts. So I talked to all of them about what they did and what they liked and what worked. And yeah,
that's cool.
it's so cool. And then the other thing that I actually never even thought about until when I was in high school, I was like the anchor for my high school news.
You look like an anchor.
I
You're
do.
pretty enough to be an anchor.
Aw,
Oh, you're
thanks.
beautiful, Tammy.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
But I have parts of me that didn't think I was smart enough to go to college. Like my
Oh,
parents, had me when they were young. They got their GEDs. They didn't finish high school, yada, yada, yada. So that turned into, this is the longest story ever. That turned into, so I ended up going to a broadcasting school. Like it was a trade school, like a 6-month program outside of Baltimore, and which is where I'm from. And I went to this broadcasting school, and I wanted to work in TV production. I kind of actually ended up wanting to do more behind the scenes stuff. And then that turned into, I worked at a community college for, like, when you take a speech class, we'd videotape your speech so that you could figure out, like, are you using your hands too much, or sort of what's happening when you give a speech. So I'd
yes.
videotape, it would record the speeches, and I would record like the theater productions. And then I was doing that. And then in order to get a raise, so I was like 20. And so then in order to get a raise, you had to start taking classes. So it's sort of this back end way of me taking college classes, which was intimidating and scary because I wasn't smart. And then all of a sudden, hey, I'm not stupid. I actually do really well, and I loved it. And I took a psychology class and was like, I love this. What is this? And so then I stopped doing the TV production stuff and started doing therapy.
Uh-huh. There you go.
10 years later.
And now
But
you're doing
now,
broadcasting
yeah, now I'm
again.
doing both. Yeah, who
Yeah.
never would have known.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah, sorry, that was like such a long story. Sorry if that was a boring story.
Oh, please. I'm feeling such kinship with you. I mean,
Aw,
so I'm feeling so like we're together,
aw,
like you're here. It's
Good.
beautiful. Yeah, I feel very connected to you.
Good. That makes me so happy. It's so funny because I don't really know how to, the listeners are just sort of this obscure number out there. I love connecting with the guests and I'm like, as long as this feels good, who cares if
That's
anybody
right.
listens?
That's right. And you know that someone will get something that,
Hmm.
it'll be just what they needed in the moment, right?
Aw. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you
So
for
it's a
saying that.
gift. It's a
Hmm.
gift.
Yeah. So I wonder if you want to jump in to the heavy stuff and talk
Okay.
about what is a legacy burden, the
Uh-huh.
listeners out there, what's a legacy burden? And then I'm not sure how much you feel comfortable sharing your story, but I'd love to hear if you feel comfortable why that's so important to you.
Sure. So I'm an only child of two Holocaust survivors who are now passed. And I grew up in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, where there weren't any other, survivors, really. They were pretty much Americans. And I grew up not really knowing that my parents had survived because they were silent about it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And so in one camp in Poland, Auschwitz, which is one of the biggest camps, Auschwitz and Birkenau, they tattooed their inmates, right?
Hmm.
So my mother had this tattoo on her arm with A and then a number, but I didn't know what that was. I just saw it, and every day. And it wasn't until I went to overnight camp at like 9 years old where they were showing this horrible movie called Night and Fog.
My
9 years
gosh.
old, and we were seeing emaciated prisoners, um, where, and it was horrible with, thousands of bodies being pitched from trucks into big holes. And it wasn't until then when I was crying and everybody else was crying, and then my counselor told us that my parents were Holocaust survivors and they had gone through what we just saw in that movie. Can you imagine?
No. Holy cow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. So all through my growing up, I was like really sad. I would cry for no reason at all. I didn't really understand it. My So I would be like at a deli with my mom, and I was like 9, and we were sitting next to these two women, and my mother was being bitchy to me, because she was angry a lot, of course. Now
Mm.
I understand that.
Mm.
And so I said, Mom, what's your problem? What's wrong? And she looks at the two women next to us and she says, I wish I had my parents, or I wish I had my sister to have lunch with. I wish I had my sister to have lunch with. Yeah. I know. It's very sad. Very, very sad.
But also really heavy, is it not? Like, I can't imagine my son who just wants to play with Legos. Like, that's too heavy for him.
Right.
Talk about a burden, right? That's too much of a burden for him to even fathom.
Yes. And I sensed that I'm an only child. So I, after I put all this stuff together, I sensed that I was not only their daughter, but I was the brothers they lost, the sisters they lost, the parents they lost. I was it. I
Wow.
know.
After camp, after you had that camp experience where
Yep.
this woman told you, the counselor told you this basically your story that you didn't know, do you remember going home and saying like, "What?" Or do you remember not, like, what happened after that? Like, did your parents
That's an
ever?
interesting question. I don't think I really, I don't think I might have asked something. Um, what I do remember is when I was in my early 30s and I was having Mother's Day lunch at this fancy place. I was married to my first husband. I think my first child was born, and Schindler's List had come out. And he's a Jew. He's a Schindler Jew. He's on that list, my father. Yeah, he's a Schindler Jew. He was saved by Schindler, my father.
Holy cow.
He's on the list. He's listed as Schlosser, which is locksmith in German. They had jobs. That's what he did for the Jews. He gave them jobs, and my father's job was locksmith on the list. It's really remarkable.
Wow.
Yeah, it's remarkable. You know, I've been learning because I've been tracing my family tree. I went to Poland and went to Tarnow where my mother was born, and found out that my grandfather had a hat store in Tarnow, and my mother's sister was in university. She was going to be like a doctor, and she was taken from the university, I guess, to the camp and died. And do you know that they had Jewish students were in their own books in the university? Can you believe that? So that's how they were taken. They were in special books. So how I got into this legacy burden is I started, so it took me like, I don't know, 56 years. And Chris Burris had told me about the Zen Peacemakers. And the Zen Peacemakers are this group of people who go to places of genocide and bear witness. So they went, so Bernie Glassman, who died last year, he started this retreat, and he took people since 1996. He went to Auschwitz with groups of people from America and Europe since 1996, and they're still doing it. And they go to Rwanda, and I think this year there's going to be one in Israel. And we've made a connection with Native American Oglala in South Dakota, which I've gone to for 4 years, and just bear witness to their stories. And we've developed this amazing connection with these Native Americans in South Dakota, and we go like every year. And so I went with Chris in 2012. I met him there. And then I started going like every year for 4 years. And then I took a break, and then I went back last year, 2 years ago. And then last year, because now they do groups in the morning to process. So last year there was like, I don't know, like 100 people that came. So I ran one of the groups in the morning.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's been really a wonderful journey, but very heavy, as you say.
Yeah.
And since then, I realized that there is this thing called epigenetics. Have you heard of it? Right. So it's fairly new. It's like 10, 12 years. But there's a woman named Rachel Yehuda who's worked with children of Holocaust survivors. She's a researcher in New York, and she also worked with mothers who were pregnant during 9/11 and studied the children, the babies, you know, when they came out and so on. And she found that children of survivors had the same cortisol levels, stress levels, as their parents. So that even though I didn't go through the Holocaust, I have similar trauma as my parents.
And not just because of being a child of your parents, that's actually your genetics is
That's right.
holding that. Yeah,
That's right. It's transferred genetically.
right, right,
It's
right,
yeah, it's amazing.
right. What was it like for you the first time you went to Auschwitz? I never say that right.
Auschwitz.
Auschwitz.
Yeah, like
I'm still not going to say it right.
schwitzing is like sweating in
Oh,
Yiddish, schwitzing. So Auschwitz. So I was totally numb. I was totally disconnected.
okay.
Um, I was very hard for me to take it all in.
At that point, I'm going to kind of back you up again. At that point, had you heard your parents' story or had you gotten a little more information about,
Right.
yeah,
Right. So
from your parents?
with my dad, when I was like at the restaurant when I was like in my early 30s, and he had seen Schindler's List. That was the one time I remember that he told me a story of his experience. And when he told me, there was so much pain in his eyes, that I could hardly bear it.
Mm,
And
mm,
that's when I remember him opening up a little bit more,
mm,
was when the movie came out. Yeah.
mm. Was he, did anyone reach out to him during the movie or, but like during the process of making the movie
Yeah,
or,
they asked him if, because, at the end of Schindler's List, they had survivors and their children at the end of that movie, and they asked if he would come, and he said no.
wow.
Yeah.
Mm,
And he was the sweetest, he was the sweetest man. He was just such a nice man. Yeah.
mm,
But he had like, he was also a prisoner of war because he was in the Polish army.
mm,
So he had, he was outside in his underwear in very extreme conditions. They had him working out there, and Poland can be really cold,
mm.
and so he had a little, agoraphobia. I
Okay.
mean, he worked and he was loved by everybody. He was a manager at a sweater mill and, managed all these big machines and so on. But yeah.
Mm,
So he would withdraw sometimes after he would like take me to the zoo in very hot weather. He would just kind of disappear. He had migraines throughout his life, very, very bad migraines.
mm,
Right. But they were very, very quiet. And it took them kind of me getting much older and them getting much older to appreciate what heroes they were.
mm.
I
Wow.
mean, through all that adversity and trauma, they
Yeah.
really created an amazing life for themselves and for me. So,
Mm, mm.
yeah, but it took a while for me
Yeah.
to really get that.
Well, was that part of your healing to, I guess I'm curious about, about your healing process, about healing from the legacy burdens that have been on you or in you.
Right, right. Yeah. So through the internal family systems model, I had worked with Barb Cargill, who did a lot of legacy stuff at the time, and that really, really helped.
My guess is you didn't even maybe realize what you were carrying that was a legacy burden.
Right. No, I didn't until, I found IFS and I started working with these legacy burdens and realized that they weren't mine. And, and I believe that a lot of qualities that we carry, like, for example, maybe not qualities, but emotions, for example, anxiety. I believe that anxiety can be transmitted from one generation to another. And, when I ask people how much percentage of this anxiety belongs to you and how much belongs to them, to your ancestors, it's amazing. They just know intuitively.
Mm.
And then we can release that before we release their own anxiety. And sometimes it's easier to release that than their own that they're carrying. So
Yeah, so I want the listeners to hear this, because I feel like this is such a different concept. This idea that you might not even know your story, or you might not know your parents' story, or the
that's right.
generations before. You might not even know the story, and if you're sitting in therapy and your therapist says how much of your anxiety is yours, or how much of it is your ancestors, you'll there could be a number that comes up without even knowing the story.
That's right.
Is that right?
That's
Okay.
right.
Yeah.
Yes. Or you can say something like, or you can identify it by saying, has anyone else in your family felt this? And they'll say, yeah. I mean, for as long as I can remember, my mother was anxious.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like such a great way, instead of working, like immediately starting to work with the parts of the person that are anxious, let's just say, that it's like, let's clear, would you say it that way? Let's clear the legacy burdens first.
Right. Right. And organically, you usually do work with people's parts, not the legacy burden organically.
Right.
But as get to see that there's something that's really pervasive, that's bogging
Mm,
them down, you can link it to their family of origin.
okay. Okay. And
Right.
then, yeah. So would it feel, how would you feel about giving an example from your work that you've done in the past, of a burden you were carrying and what you did, the process of releasing that burden?
Right. So, well, there's legacy burdens with alcoholism too, right?
Yeah.
So if you have a child, I've had children of alcoholics a lot. And so, there's much more percentage, there's a increased percentage of you becoming alcoholic if one of your parents, right, have been.
Right. Right.
So I think there's this legacy of don't talk, don't trust, and don't feel in
Mm.
children of alcoholics, right?
Mm-hmm.
So so even just identifying that,
Mm.
and so I ask somebody, let's just say take anxiety. So I ask a client, they're adult children of alcoholics, and I ask them, so you've experienced a lot of anxiety, and who else has experienced that anxiety?
Mm.
And a lot of times they self-medicate with alcohol to get rid of the anxiety, try to get rid of the anxiety and the pain.
Right.
And so they'll say, my mother is very anxious, or my father is very anxious, and, drank to self-medicate. So then I take a piece of paper and I draw a circle and I say, so just spontaneously draw a line in the circle to signify how much is yours and how much is theirs. And then they draw a line, and then we worked with the anxiety. And you can do it, one of two ways. You can have them invite their ancestors to come. A lot of times people do a bonfire.
Mm.
This person did a bonfire, and just invite the ancestors, and they can let go of their anxiety, and the client can let go of her anxiety. And
Mm.
let it burn away. The other way is to kind of see all of the ancestors down the ancestral line and have them release the burden from one person to another until the very end, until they release it. And then the last person brings in the quality that they now need or want more of. And they pass it back down to the client.
Beautiful.
And
Yeah.
and when I did this work, I did the long line, and I invited my children to that line because I think it's really important to invite the children, because why this is so important is that we are inadvertently passing these burdens onto our children unless we're aware of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's remarkable how much this happens.
Yeah, right. Well, and if you're saying even in the genetics, so if it's your parents are Holocaust survivors, you're the only child of them, and then your boys are the child of you.
That's
So
right.
it makes sense that it would be passed on to your boys,
Right.
just even genetically.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So and again, I think you can do this without knowing the story, right? You can,
That's
or
right.
even my ancestors, right? I don't have to have like a degree in like to know all my ancestors, right? I don't have to have gone on ancestry.com and have the 10 names of all my ancestors. I can just do it and pass it back as far as it goes, and pass it back to the last person, and then they unburden it they release it.
Right.
And then they invite in equality, and then invite in sort of the opposite way, kind of coming back. So all the ancestors to you and then to your kids.
Right. Right. And when I did it, I had guides. So I had a guide who kind of, blew this powder from a straw. And my firstborn blew it to the secondborn. The secondborn blew it to me. I blew it to. It was really remarkable. Yes.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense of who that guide was or is?
Well, she's a woman with like hair down to the floor. I don't really talk about this usually, but those trolls, those troll dolls with the big eyes
and the hair. Yeah.
Yes, like that.
Yeah. I love that.
But live. And I also have gotten in touch. So when I went to Auschwitz, I, would go off on my own. And I started talking to my relatives and telling them about my kids and my parents and how they're okay. And yeah.
Yeah. And is that part of I'm going to cry now. Is that, I guess I want to talk about the idea of bearing witness. And so, so tell me about that when you were there and you were noticing parts that were completely cutting you off. And then, but you're also noticing this amazing healing that was probably happening with just talking to your ancestors and telling them about your parents and about you and your kids, and that you survived, that there was part of the family that actually survived. And I guess it sort of, is that part of the bearing witness process, or how does that come into play?
Well, I was able to, when I spoke to them, I was really able to get messages from them, right? And one of the ways, so let me just stay with this. So I was getting this message that they were really happy that we came, that we come as a group, and that we bear witness to, the souls that died there, and the soil and the land. And Tammy, I swear, every time I go there, I know this sounds really corny, but I hug these trees that have been there for a really long time. And I feel things. I feel their witnessing and their pain. And I get in touch with the souls there through the trees. and also walking this path that I go to every year. But what I was hearing was that they didn't want us just to cry, that they wanted to hear laughter, and they were happy that we were alive and living a life, even
Wow.
though theirs was cut off.
Wow.
Yeah, right.
Mm. And then for you to be able to be such an open vessel and to take that in, and then to be able to share to the group that you're getting this message, so that there isn't just weeping and mourning, but there's also this
Exactly.
celebration of life.
Yes.
Mm,
And
mm.
actually, my husband and I, my current husband and I, got married in Auschwitz in 2013. And it was like the most, and that's, where I got these messages that, there was one woman who got upset because they didn't think that there should be so much joy and happiness in this place. And I had spoken to the whole group and talked to them about what I got from my relatives, that they want us to be happy. They don't want us to just cry here. And that calmed her down. She got it. Like, she really realized that
Wow.
that was true.
Wow.
It was amazing. And this wedding, these were virtually strangers, but I felt like they were my best friends for my whole life. They made a wedding. They had a wedding cake. They played Polish games with us. They lifted us up in the chairs like the Jewish wedding. It was really amazing. There was a rabbi there
Oh,
that
wow.
married us, who's like a tantric sex master as well. I mean, and guitar playing. It was amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds beautiful. And it sounds like I just got this image of all the souls there celebrating, like all the souls around, like clapping and dancing and laughing with you.
Yes. Yes.
Because you're bear witnessing to their pain and the stories, but then now they get to bear witness to your life and to this celebration.
Yes. Yes. And now I kind of like call on my relatives. So like you said, you don't need to know them. You don't need to have met them. I call on them, for support. Like if I'm speaking or if I'm nervous or,
Yes, right.
yeah. And so I don't
Yes.
feel so alone anymore. I feel
Mm,
connected to their
mm,
souls.
mm,
Yeah.
mm. What about this idea that, and clearly this isn't how you feel, but the idea of the burden is the only word I can think of that is on your shoulders to live an amazing life, like this responsibility of probably before you did this work, like the responsibility of being an only child with your parents who have no other relatives, like that burden on your shoulders.
For me, at this juncture, I feel, I do feel like my life has been a blessing
Mm,
because, I never had grandparents. I never met them on either side, which is unusual. And to go to Auschwitz, I can't even imagine how my mother survived. I mean, it's a complete miracle. So I believe that my life is a miracle.
mm,
And so I really feel like my life is a gift. So that's how I live.
mm.
I feel grateful all the time, even if I'm bummed out and depressed. I can always, I can go outside and feel grateful, or I
Mm,
can feel grateful that I can move my body.
mm,
I just feel, and I've always been that way,
mm,
that
mm,
my life is such a gift.
mm.
Yeah.
Were your parents alive to meet their grandbabies?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So my dad died at 93. So
Wow.
he was very close to my sons and my
Mm,
mother too. Yeah,
mm. So he ended up living a very long life.
he did. Yeah, and my mom died at 87.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mm,
I mean, I know it sounds corny, but I just I want to tell people that they shouldn't take their life for granted.
mm, mm,
And that each moment that we're here is a gift.
mm,
And to be able to receive, all the beauty that's here.
mm. I love that.
Right.
Yeah.
And to realize and understand that we're more the same than we're different.
Mm. Wow. Okay.
Right.
What's coming up for me is I want to say something about the trees, about
Okay.
about
Yeah.
hugging the trees, because I don't think that's corny at all. I actually think that, like, right, like if genetically it ca I'm affected by what happened to my grandparents and my great grandparents genetically, doesn't it make sense? And we're connected to the earth and the energy, and doesn't it make sense that this tree that bore witness to these horrible things, and the tree's still standing there, and the idea that that tree, as it's grown, that like parts of the tree, I don't know, it just feels like parts of the tree could have been, were obviously affected by it, because that tree was like, this big, and then so it's like how much has been held and trapped in that tree. I don't know, I just was imagining this tree, and yeah.
Yeah. I definitely go to them and feel so much from them.
Yeah,
And
like what the
I
tree's been
believe that
holding.
they've really helped me to get out some of my sadness.
Mm,
So when I hug them and I sit under a tree, which is very Native American also,
mm,
um, I release so much because they're communicating in their own way. And
right.
there are like books that have come out on on the on the life of trees and how they're all connected, you know, underground, and that if one tree gets cut down or dies, all the trees around them can get sick and die. And they warn other trees of like predators by giving off like uh, a sappy like substance in their bark. I mean, they're amazing.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
Mm,
they're living organisms. They're
mm,
living, they're alive.
yeah.
Yeah.
People want to find out more about you and what you do. I haven't told anybody what you do and who you are. So tell everybody who you are, and if they want to find out more about you, how do they do that?
Oh, yeah. So I have a private practice in Newton Center.
Do you have you have
Right.
a website or something?
Oh, I might have a website. I think I do.
Well,
Um,
people can just Google you.
yeah. My practice is relationship visions because I do a lot of
Mm,
couples work also, and I work with young adults like my kids' age. I like that age,
yeah.
and yeah,
Do you have room in your private practice to see couples and young adults?
yes,
Great.
I do.
Okay. Okay.
Yes,
Do you do any IFS consultation? Because you're a trainer. You're an assistant trainer
yes, I
for
am.
IFS.
I
Yeah.
am. Yeah, yeah.
Do you do
Yes, I do. Yeah,
consultation
sure.
stuff?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep, I do.
Okay. And then are you doing any trainings coming up this year?
I'm not. I'm finishing a training in Austin. Actually, I'm going tomorrow.
Oh, are you doing that with Mike?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, I
Right.
am. Did he tell
Uh,
you about it?
well, no. What happened was I was with the level two with him and Anne in Boston, and I thought that he read this poem Do you remember you sent me the poem? So I
Yes,
thought that he read this poem, and I took a picture of the poem. Or no, I said something about, what was it? Safe spaces, or there's no such thing as safe
that's
space.
right.
It's warm
Yes,
space or something like that. So I
yes.
quoted him. That's what it was. So I thought I quote
Brave, brave
brave. That's
space.
it. That's it. It's not safe space, it's brave space, and that comes
Right.
from a poem. But all I heard in the midst of the training was the term brave space. And so I think I put it on like Instagram and Facebook or something. And then you texted me and said, "Hey, I just read that poem in Austin. Here, it's come from a poem." And I was like, "Oh." And then the next morning, Mike came up to me and he was like, "You can't quote me. I didn't say that." And said it. And I was like, "Oh my gosh."
That's so funny.
It was so funny because then parts of me were super triggered, like you guys were mad at me, I did something wrong, like
Oh,
this whole story about how I was just trying to put it out there and I messed it up. And then I was like, I can't believe I heard it that wrong. I swear I heard him say it, but he said no. So I was like, I don't
oh,
know.
you mean you thought it was his quote? You thought he was creating it? Yeah.
Yes, yes. And he says that he didn't even say it. It was from the poem that Anne read. And I was like, I don't know that I got it that wrong, but okay. I trust
It
him.
doesn't
It
matter.
doesn't matter. And I trust him. And
Right.
he was
It
really
was,
sweet with it. And you were
yeah.
too. How long have you been an assistant trainer?
Oh, a long time. Yeah, I'm trying to think. At least 10 years.
How are you feeling about all that you've shared?
I'm feeling great.
Good. I
I'm
feel
feeling
so
great.
thankful that you are opening yourself up to me and to the listeners.
Yeah. What
Go
I'm
ahead.
curious about is how you can do this whole interview in a coffee shop and not get interrupted. There's
Um,
nobody there. It's just totally quiet.
Well, I'm kind of in a corner. So I'm in a corner. The rest, there's the bathroom. So the rest of the coffee shop is that way.
Yeah, but there's no one there. It looks
Yeah.
like a little house.
Yeah, it's just cute. So I live and work in Dover, and it's in my office and this coffee shop are in an old houses that, speaking of burdens, this is kind of interesting. So there are these two houses right along the river, and there is a horrible Indian war, where all the houses were burnt down. There was a huge massacre in this like parking lot across the way. All the houses were burnt down except for these two houses. And so there's stories about Native Americans that were hiding out in them, and they were owned by these captains, or sort of all this kind of these stories about these two houses. And my office is in now both of them. Like my office is in one of the houses, and then this little coffee shop is in the other.
That's great.
So I always end with, if you were not doing all the things that you do, if you weren't a assistant trainer and if you weren't in psychotherapy, what would you be doing instead? If you could do whatever you wanted, what would you do?
Hmm. Well, I love to travel and I've traveled a lot. I was thinking like, wouldn't it be cool if I just decided that I was going to go to, let's say, Colorado, and I would put up, I'm going to arrive in Colorado and I'll be there from this time to this time, and I'm offering sessions, and, I'll be at a hotel and I line up some people and I just do sessions, or I do a group, but spontaneously, right? I would like to do that.
That sounds really fun. Yeah. And then
Yes,
whoever in Colorado wants to come and you lead this beautiful thing.
yes. Like I
Yeah.
was reading about these women who, I don't know, I think they meet at different like trailer parks and anybody can come. What are they called? Some grandmother thing. And people come from all over and they just say, we're going to be at the certain place at the certain time and you can come. And it's spontaneous. It's like a few days before or something like that.
Right. I think my managers wouldn't allow me to do that.
Uh-huh.
because there's a part of me that's like, yes, I would love to just even live that spontaneously, but I don't even live that. I can't even be like, hey, do you want to get together on Saturday to be like, hey, who wants to do something at Saturday? It's like, no, I've got
Right.
to plan out 6 weeks ahead of time.
Yep.
Do you want to have
Yep.
lunch on Saturday?
Yes. But when you do get together spontaneously, it can be so amazing, right?
Hmm.
It can.
That's true. If you ever like bump into somebody, then you end up having this incredible conversation. Then you're like not hurried. And you're like, hey, do you want to sit and relax and talk for a minute or whatever? And that always feels so nice. Flowy. So my word for the year is flow. So I
Yes.
need a little more flow in my life.
There you go.
Yeah. So just sort of the following the flow. That's
Yeah.
the idea of like, can I follow the flow instead of being so like rigid, structured, manager driven? Just following the flow.
Yes.
Mm.
And I'm thinking that maybe I can do some of this legacy burden work online, like
Yeah.
have like a group online.
Yeah, because I think people, yes, I actually think that's a fantastic idea because people could be doing therapy, but this is such um, like a specific thing that you could people could be like, I'm interested in that. I think that's a fantastic idea of even doing like a workshop of over Zoom. People can come and you could do
Exactly.
this. I love that. Yes.
Yes.
And if you don't have anything lined up, so here's my manager's like now managing you. You don't have anything lined up for trainings, so
Right. That's right.
I think that's a fantastic idea.
Yes, that's what I would do with my space. That's what I'd like to do.
I
Yeah,
love it. Will you let me know if any of that stuff comes to be? Let me know so I can plug it on here because I would love
sure.
to tell
Thank
people.
you.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Of course.
Yeah, and that and for couples also, because I really love couples
Yeah. Well,
and I like helping couples.
so let's maybe meet again later this year
Sure.
and talk about couples.
Great.
Would you like to do that?
I'd love to
And then
do
I get to
that.
see you again.
Yes,
I was thinking about maybe I need to come have an excuse to go down to Boston. You and I can have lunch again.
that would be
I think
wonderful.
that's what I need to do.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This was great.
You're welcome, Tammy. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. I'll talk to you
Okay.
soon.
Okay.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. Mwah.
Thanks for hanging out today. If you liked this episode, make sure you subscribe. And if you really like this episode, share it with a friend and leave a review. You can follow me on Instagram at IFS Tammy and join our community on Facebook at the One Inside Podcast. Talk to you next time. Today's episode was sponsored by Brighter Vision. What's the point of having a beautiful website if it doesn't attract the clients you want to see? As the worldwide leaders of website design for therapists, Brighter Vision sees this issue happen way too often. A nice looking website doesn't equate to a successful website. The truth is, your current website might even be turning off potential clients. That's where Brighter Vision comes in. Brighter Vision's team of website designers will create a website that is centered around attracting and retaining your ideal client so that you can have a nice looking website as well as a successful one. Better yet, Brighter Vision is offering $100 off exclusively for listeners of the One Inside podcast. To take advantage of this offer, simply go to brightervision.com/inside. Again, that's brightervision.com/inside.